The emergency alert started, and in the morning, Admiral Lisa Carter rolled out of bed when her communicator began. Screaming, she grabbed it with shaking hands, still half asleep. "What is it?" she asked. "Ma'am, you need to get to command right now," came the voice of Lieutenant Ben Sullivan. "We have a situation." Lisa threw on her uniform and ran to the command center. When she arrived, the room was buzzing with activity. Officers were running between stations, pointing at screens and talking. In excited voices, "Report, Lisa," said Ben. Turned to her with wide eyes. "Admiral, we just received a transmission. It's from the USS Meridian." Lisa felt her heart stop. The Meridian had been missing for years. Everyone assumed it was destroyed somewhere in deep space. The ship had left Earth with crew members on an exploration mission. They were supposed to return after years. "Are you sure?" Lisa asked. "Yes, ma'am. The signal is definitely from Captain Jake Morrison. He's requesting permission to dock at Luna Station." Lisa stared at the main screen. They're floating in space. Near the edge of their solar system was a ship, but it didn't look like the Meridian. She remembered the vessel was 3 times larger than before. Its hull seemed to shimmer and change color as she watched. Strange patterns of light moved across its surface, like living things. "My God," she whispered. "What happened to them?" The communication officer turned around. "Admiral, Captain Morrison is requesting to speak with you." Directly put him through the screen. Flickered in Jake Morrison's face appeared. Lisa gasped. The man she remembered had been young, maybe years old. This Jake looked older, but not years older. His hair was silver, and there were scars on his face she had never seen before, but his eyes were different. They seemed to glow with an inner light. "Hello, Lisa," Jake said with a smile. "It's good to see you again." "Jake, where have you been? We thought you were dead. What happened to your ship?" "It's a long story. We need to talk. All of us I need to speak with. Earth's leaders in the Galactic Council." Lisa noticed something strange in his voice. It sounded like multiple people were speaking at once, creating a strange echo effect. "Jake, how many people are on your ship?" "About, but you left with only I." "No, we made some friends along the way." Before Lisa could ask more questions, her scanner officer called out. "Admiral, you need to see this. The ship's energy readings are off the charts. They're showing power levels higher than our entire defense grid." Lisa looked at the numbers on her screen. The Meridian was producing more energy than should be possible. Their best chips could barely manage 1/10 of what she was seeing. "Jake, what kind of power source are you using?" "Something new. Don't worry. It's completely safe. Can we dock at Luna Station?" "I need to run security scans first, of course. But Lisa, your scans won't work on us anymore. We exist in multiple dimensions now." Lisa didn't understand what he meant, but she ordered the scans anyway. The results made no sense. The ship appeared solid on some sensors, but invisible on others. Heat scanners showed it was room temperature, but energy detector said it was burning hotter than a star. "This is impossible," Ben said, staring at his instruments. The Meridian began moving toward Luna Station. Lisa watched in amazement as the ship seemed to phase through their defensive barriers without setting off any alarms. It was like the shields didn't even know the ship was there. "How are they doing that?" someone asked. "I don't know," Lisa replied. As the ship got closer, more details became visible. The hull wasn't made of any metal. Lisa recognized it. Looked like it was carved from crystal, but it bent in flecks like living tissue. Sections of the ship seemed to be transparent, showing rooms inside that were bigger than should fit in the space available. "Admiral," the communication officer said, "I'm getting reports from around the galaxy. Every major government is asking about the ship. Word is spreading fast." Lisa nodded. She could imagine the panic this would cause. A human ship with impossible technology would make everyone nervous. The Corvani Empire considered themselves the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. They wouldn't like being shown up by humans. The Meridian reached Luna Station and began docking procedures. Lisa watched as the ship's hull seemed to melt and reform around the docking clamps. It was like watching liquid metal, but controlled by intelligence. Docking complete, came the report. "Open a channel to the station." Lisa ordered. The screen showed the main docking bay of Luna Station. The airlock opened and people began walking out. Lisa counted them. As they appeared, there were humans, but also beings she had never seen before. Some were tall and thin, almost transparent, with skin that looked like Starlight others appear to be made of living crystal, their bodies catching and reflecting light in impossible ways. A few look like they might be machines, but they move with the grace of living creatures, and leading them all was Jake Morrison. He looked around the docking bay and smiled, then he looked directly at the camera. "Hello, Earth," he said. "We're home." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. Something told her that nothing would ever be the same again. The galaxy was about to change, and humanity was about to become something completely different. She grabbed her communicator and began making calls. The president needed to know, the Galactic Council needed to know, everyone needed to know that the Meridian had returned, and it had brought friends. As she watched Jake and his impossible crew walk through Luna Station, Lisa couldn't help but wonder what they had found out there in the dark between the stars, and more importantly, what it had done to them. The emergency alert that had woken her up was just the beginning. She could feel it in her bones. The real emergency was just starting. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, watching through the thick glass as Jake Morrison's crew continued to exit their ship. She'd been counting for hours, and people were still coming out. The numbers didn't make sense. The Meridian was big, but not big enough to hold beings. "How is this possible?" she asked Ben Sullivan, who stood beside her with a tablet full of readings that made no sense. "I don't know, Admiral. The ship's interior space appears to be larger than its exterior dimensions. That should be impossible." Lisa watched as more strange beings walked through the docking bay. The tall, transparent ones moved like they were floating instead of walking. Their feet barely touched the ground. The crystal creatures made musical sounds when they moved, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Admiral," a voice called from behind her. Lisa turned to see Dr. Amy Brooks walking toward them, but this wasn't the Amy Brooks she remembered years ago. Amy had been the Meridian's medical officer. She was a small woman with brown hair and kind eyes. The person walking toward Lisa now looked like Amy, but everything about her was different. Amy's eyes glowed with a soft blue light. When she moved, Lisa could see through her for just a moment, as if she wasn't completely solid. And when Amy smiled, Lisa felt a strange warmth in her mind, like someone had just shared a happy memory with her. "Hello, Lisa," Amy said. "It's wonderful to see you again." "Amy, is that really you?" "Yes, though. I'm quite different now." "We all are." Lisa studied Amy's face. "What happened to you out there?" "We learned things, amazing things. Our minds expanded beyond what we thought was possible for humans." Ben stepped forward with his scanner. "Dr. Brooks, may I take some readings?" Amy laughed, and the sound was like music. "Of course, but your instruments won't understand what they're seeing." Ben ran his scanner over Amy. The device immediately started beeping in confusion. Numbers flashed on the screen that made no sense. According to the readings, Amy existed in different dimensions at the same time. "This can't be right," Ben muttered. "Actually, it is," Amy said. "I can see quantum particles with my eyes now. Watch." Amy reached out her hand toward the wall. Instead of touching it, her hand passed through the metal like it was water. She pulled her hand back, and the wall was perfectly intact. "How?" Lisa whispered. "Matter is mostly empty space." Amy explained. "Once you understand how atoms really work, you can move between them. It's like learning a new language." A new voice spoke from the doorway. "Amy, are you showing off again?" Lisa turned to see Rick Hayes, the Meridian's former navigator. Like Amy, he looked similar to how she remembered him, but changed. Rick's hair had turned completely white, and his eyes seemed to hold tiny stars inside them. "Rick," Lisa said, "you look different." "Yes, we all do. The experience changed us in ways we never expected." Ben pointed his scanner at Rick. The readings were just as confusing as Amy's had been. "Rick, how do you navigate now? Do you still use computers?" Rick smiled. "I don't need computers anymore. I can feel the shape of space itself." Watch Rick closed his eyes and held out his hands in the air. Between his palms, a three-dimensional map appeared. It showed their solar system, but with details no human instrument could detect. "Mars is going to have a small solar storm hit it in hours," Rick said, pointing to a spot on the map. "Jupiter's moon Europa has a pod of space whales swimming under its ice, and there's a Corvani spy ship hiding behind our moon right now." Lisa grabbed her communicator. "Command, do we have any unidentified ships in our system?" "Let me check, Admiral," came the reply. After a moment, the voice Returned Admiral, we just found a cloaked Corvani vessel behind the moon. How did you know, Lisa? Stare at Rick. How did you? Do that space isn't empty, Rick. Explain it's full of information, if you know how. To read at the beings we met taught us how to listen to what the universe is. Saying more crew members began arriving in the observation deck, Lisa recognized some faces, but they were all changed. Paul Davis, the former security chief, now seemed to be made partly of shadow. When he moved, darkness moved with him like a living thing. Paul, Lisa said, carefully, what can you do now? Paul smiled and reached into his pocket. He pulled out what looked like a simple metal rod, but as Lisa watched, the rod began to change. It stretched and twisted, becoming more complex. Within seconds, Paul was holding a device that looked like advanced technology. I made this from the metals in my pocket, Paul said. Iron, copper, a few other elements once. You understand how atoms one connect. You can convince them to form whatever you need. He handed the device to Ben. This is a scanner that can see through dimensions. It should help you understand our ship better. Ben took the device with trembling hands. When he turned it on, holographic displays appeared in the air around them. The displays showed the Meridian, but not as a normal ship. It existed in multiple layers of reality at once. My God, Ben whispered, your ship is bigger on the inside because most of it exists in other dimensions. Exactly, Paul said. We learned that reality has many layers. Most people only see one layer, but there are countless others. Lisa felt overwhelmed. How many of you can do these things? All of us, Amy replied. Every human who made the journey, the abilities are different for each person, but we've all been changed. What about the non-humans on your ship? Our friends are refugees. Mostly their world were destroyed by wars or disasters. We offer them sanctuary. A new being entered the observation deck. This one looked like it was made of living metal, but it moved with grace and purpose. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind through trees. Greetings, Admiral Carter. I am called Harmonic of Distant Stars. I speak for the architects Lisa had never heard of. The architects were the architects. We are an old race, very old. We built great cities among the stars before your species learned to make fire. But our worlds are gone now, destroyed by those who fear change. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. But we have found hope with your people. Humans have a gift that is very rare in the galaxy. You can adapt and grow in ways most beings cannot. This is why the Ancient Ones chose to teach you. The Ancient Ones, Amy stepped forward. The beings who taught us, Lisa, they're older than any civilization. We know they exist beyond normal space and time, and they've been waiting for a species like humanity for a very long time. Lisa felt a chill waiting for us. Why? Because the galaxy is about to change, Jake Morrison said as he entered the room, and someone needs to help guide that change. Lisa turned to face her old colleague. Jake looked tired but determined. In his hand, he carried what looked like a sphere of pure light. Jake, what is that? A gift from our teachers. It contains knowledge that will change everything. But first we need to talk to Earth's leaders in the Galactic Council. They need to understand what's coming. Jake looked out the window at the stars of convergence. Lisa, all the old rules are about a change, and humanity is going to be at the center of it. All Lisa realized that her life and the life of everyone in the galaxy was about to become very different. The crew of the Meridian hadn't just returned home. They had returned as something new, something powerful, something that would change everything. And she wasn't sure if that was wonderful or terrifying. The news about the Meridian spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours of the ship's return, every major government knew that humanity had gained impossible technology. The reactions were swift and predictable. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the war room on Luna Station, watching reports come in from across known space. The Corvani Empire had mobilized their science fleets. The Vorten Confederacy was moving battle groups toward human space. Even smaller governments were making emergency calls to their allies. Admiral Lieutenant Ben Sullivan said, looking up from his communication station. The Galactic Council is demanding an emergency session. They want Captain Morrison to appear before them within hours. Lisa nodded. She had expected this. The galaxy's power structure was built on everyone knowing their place. The Corvani had the best technology. The Vorthons had the strongest military. Humans were supposed to be the newcomers who stayed quiet and followed orders. What's our status with Earth Command? Lisa asked. President Kate Nelson is flying in from Earth. She'll be here in hours. She's bringing the entire cabinet with her. Good we'll need them. The door to the war room opened and Commander Steve Rodriguez walked in. Steve had been Jake Morrison, second in command on the Meridian. Like the others, he had been changed by whatever happened in deep space. Steve's most obvious change was his eyes. They were completely black, now like looking into deep space itself, but when he looked at someone, they felt like he could see everything about them past and future. Admiral Carter, Steve said, with a slight smile, I thought you should know that we have visitors. What kind of visitors? The kind that don't announce themselves. There are Corvani ships hiding in the outer system. They think their cloaking technology makes them invisible. Ben checked his scanners. I'm not picking up anything. Your instruments can't detect them, Steve explained, but we can feel them. They're trying to study us from a distance. Lisa felt a chill. The Corvani were famous for their advanced science, but they were also known for taking what they wanted if they thought human technology was too dangerous. They might try to destroy Earth before humanity could use it. Are they a threat? Lisa asked. Not yet, but they're scared. Fear makes people do stupid things. Before Lisa could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The main screen lit up when incoming transmission. This is High Commander Zex Corvani of the Imperial Science Fleet. Came a cold voice. We demand immediate access to the human vessel designated Meridian. Refusal will be considered an act of war against the Corvani Empire. Lisa looked at Steve, who just shrugged. Should I handle this? Go ahead. Steve stepped forward and activated the communication system. High Commander, this is Commander Rodriguez of Meridian. Your request is denied. You dare refuse. The Corvani Empire, the alien's voice was filled with rage. We have ships in your system. Surrender the vessel immediately. Steve smiled, and Lisa felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. When Steve spoke again, his voice carried a power that made everyone in the room step back. High Commander, you have ships in our system. Your lead vessel, the Dominator, suffered a complete power failure seconds ago. Your crew is currently floating in space wondering why all their technology stopped working. On the main screen, they could see a massive Corvani warship suddenly become visible. Was tumbling slowly through space, completely dark. Ben scanners immediately picked up the ship. Admiral, they're broadcasting a distress signal. Complete systems failure. High Commander Zex Corvani's voice came back, but now it sounded worried instead of angry. What did you do to our ship? Nothing permanent, Steve replied. I simply asked their computer systems to take a nap. Your crew is safe, but I suggest you reconsider your approach. This is impossible. Corvani technology cannot be affected by external forces. Your technology is based on the idea that consciousness and matter are separate things, Steve explained. Patiently, once you understand that consciousness can directly affect matter, many things become possible. Lisa watched in amazement as the dead Corvani ship suddenly came back to life. Its lights turned on and it stopped tumbling. Your systems are restored, Steve said. But High Commander, I want you to understand something. We could have destroyed all of your ships just as easily. We chose not to because we don't want to be your enemies. The communication channel was quiet for a long moment. When the High Commander spoke again, his voice was much more respectful. Commander Rodriguez, what do you want from us? Nothing. We want to help you just like we want to help everyone else in the galaxy. Help us with what? Steve looked at Lisa, who nodded. It was time to tell them the truth. High Commander, are you familiar with the ancient records of your people, the stories about the dark time when your home world was attacked? Those are myths, legends from before we achieved spaceflight. No, they're not. Years ago, something attacked Corva Prime. Your people barely escaped the attackers, consumed your star system, and moved on to other targets. Lisa saw fear creep into the High Commander's voice. How could you know about that? Because we met them, Steve said simply. In the deep dark beyond the galactic rim, they're called the Devourers, and they're coming back. The communication channel fell silent. Lisa could imagine the chaos on the Corvani ships as their commanders tried to process this information. Dr. Amy Brooks entered the war room, floating a few inches above the floor. Her presence filled the room with a sense of calm. Steve, are you frightening the Corvani again? She asked with a gentle smile, just explaining the situation. Amy stepped forward and spoke into the communication system. High Commander, my name is Dr. Amy Brooks. I was a Meridian's medical officer, I know. This is difficult to believe, but everything Commander Rodriguez told you is true. Amy gestured and holographic. Images appeared in the air above them. The images showed star systems being consumed by massive dark ships. This is what we found in deep space. The Devourers destroyed thousands of civilizations. They're heading toward our part of the galaxy now. High Commander X Corvani's voice was barely a whisper. How long do we have? 4 years, maybe 5, Amy replied. But there is hope. The beings who taught us how to expand our consciousness survived the last attack. They've been waiting for species that could help them prepare for the Devourer's return. What kind of help we need to work together? Steve said, all of us humans, Corvani Vorthans, everyone. The old way of thinking where each species fights for dominance won't work against the Devourers. They feed on conflict and destruction. Lisa heard new alarms sounding. Ben looked up from his station with wide eyes. Admiral, we have incoming ships, Vorton battle cruisers of them. The main screen shifted to show the new arrivals. Of Vorton ships were massive and heavily armed. They took positions around Luna Station in a classic attack formation. Attention, human forces. Came a new voice. This is General Thax Voron of the Confederate fleet. You will surrender the alien vessel and submit to Confederacy authority. Steve, and here I thought the Corvani were impatient. Can you handle ships as easily as you handle one? Lisa asked. Probably, but I'd rather not. Violence just makes everything worse. Steve activated the communication system again. General Thax Vorthon, this is Commander Rodriguez. I assume you've been listening to our conversation with the Corvani. We have your claims about ancient enemies are clearly fabrications designed to make us afraid. Then let me show you something that might change your mind. Steve closed his eyes and held out his hands. A space around Luna Station suddenly filled with images, not holographic projections, but actual three-dimensional scenes that everyone could see through their viewports. The images showed the Vorthon homeworld as it existed thousands of years ago. Then they showed massive dark ships arriving and beginning to strip the planet bare. This is the real history of your world. General Steve said your people escaped the colony worlds and rebuilt your civilization, but you forgot where you came from. General Thaxford's voice was shaking. This cannot be real. It is, and unless we work together, it's going to happen again to all of us. Lisa watched as both the Corvani and Voron fleets began backing away from Luna Station. The display of power had frightened them, but the historical revelations had shaken them to their core. High Commander General, Amy said gently, we're not your enemies. We're all facing the same threat. The question is whether we'll face it together or separately. The war room fell quiet as they waited for responses. Lisa realized that the next few moments would determine the future of the galaxy. Would the old enemies become allies, or would fear drive them apart when they needed each other most? Days after the confrontation with the alien fleets, Captain Jake Morrison finally agreed to tell the full story. He sat in the main conference room of Luna Station, surrounded by leaders from Earth and representatives from different alien governments. Everyone wanted to know what had really happened to Meridian during those missing years. President Kate Nelson leaned forward in her chair. Jake, we need to understand, where did you go? What changed you and your crew? Jake looked around the room at all the faces watching him. His silver hair seemed to glow under the lights, and his eyes held depths that made people uncomfortable if they looked too long. It started during our 3rd year in deep space. Jake began. We were exploring a region beyond the galactic rim, farther than any human had gone before. Our mission was to map new star systems and look for habitable worlds. Dr. Amy Brooks, who was floating in her chair rather than sitting, added, we were excited. Every day brought new discoveries, new planets, new forms of life, new possibilities for humanity's future. Then we found a barrier. Jake continued. It wasn't visible to our instruments, but when we tried to cross into a particular region of space, our ship just stopped. Not our engines, not our power systems. The ship itself refused to move forward. High Scientist Vex Corvani, who had joined the meeting by hologram, interrupted. A force field of some kind. No, Jake replied, something much stranger. It was like space itself was telling us to wait. Commander Steve Rodriguez stood up and walked to the large window that looked out at the stars. We spent weeks trying to understand what was happening. Our instruments detected nothing unusual, but none of U.S. could shake the feeling that we were being watched. Watched by whom? Asked General Thaxford. also participating by hologram the Primarchs. Amy said softly, though we didn't know that name yet. Jake nodded on the RD. They made contact, not through our communication systems, but directly into our minds, all crew members. Experienced it at the same time, Admiral Lisa Carter, who had been listening quietly, asked, "What did they say?" They didn't use words. Jake explained they shared images, emotions, concepts that our language can't describe, but the basic message was clear. They had been waiting for us, waiting for humans specifically. President Nelson asked, waiting for a species, with our particular type of consciousness. Steve corrected, they had been searching the galaxy for thousands of years, looking for minds that could adapt to what they needed to teach DR. Amy Brooks gestured, and holographic images appeared in the air above the table. The images showed beings that looked like they were made of pure light, existing in structures that defied normal physics. The Primarchs exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Amy explained they gave up physical form long ago to survive the last great war. They've been hiding in the spaces between normal reality, waiting for the right species to help them do what Vex Corvani demanded. Prepare for the return of the Devourers, Jake said. Grimly, the beings that destroyed their civilization and countless others. The images changed, showing massive ships that seemed to be made of living darkness. These ships were consuming stars, turning entire solar systems into fuel for their war. Machines. The Devourers aren't just conquerors, Steve explained. They're parasites that feed on the life force of entire civilizations. They strip planets bare, consume the energy of stars, and use that power to build bigger fleets. How do you fight something like that, General? Faxfer, and asked you don't fight them. Amy said fighting them with traditional weapons is like trying to put out a fire. With gasoline, they turn conflict and destruction into more power for themselves. Jake stood up and moved to the center of the room. The Primarchs taught us a different way. They showed us how to expand our consciousness beyond the normal limits of human thinking. What does that mean exactly? President Nelson asked. It means learn to see reality as it really is. Jake explained most beings only perceive a tiny fraction of what actually exists. There are layers upon layers of reality, dimensions folded inside other dimensions, possibilities that most minds can't even imagine. Steve turned from the window. The training took years of learning to let go of everything we thought we knew about how the universe works. It was difficult. Amy added, many times we wanted to give up and come home. Our minds weren't designed to handle that much information, that much possibility. The holographic images shifted again, showing the crew of the Meridian working alongside the Primarchs and structures that seemed to exist in multiple places at once. But gradually we began to understand. Jake continued, we learned that consciousness isn't separate from matter. Thought can directly affect reality if you know how to focus it properly. That's how you can do the things we've seen. Lisa realized, moving through solid objects, creating energy from nothing, reading information from space itself, exactly, and more. Importantly, we learn how to teach others. Vex Corvani leaned forward in his holographic projection. You're saying you can teach these abilities to other species? Yes, but only to those who are ready. The process requires giving up many old beliefs about how reality works. It's not easy for most minds to accept. What about the refugees on your ship? General Faxon asked. The non-human species we've seen, Steve answered. We encountered them during our final years of training. Their worlds have been attacked by scouts from the Devourer fleet. The Primarchs asked us to rescue as many as we could. These species had already begun the consciousness expansion process on their own. Amy explained the approaching danger from the Devourers triggered something in their minds, a survival response that opened them to new possibilities. Jake returned to his seat. That's when we realized the truth. The Devourers aren't just coming to destroy civilizations. Their approach actually triggers evolutionary leaps in the species they're about to attack. A defense mechanism. President Nelson asked. More than that, it's like the universe itself is trying to create beings capable of stopping the Devourers, but most species don't have enough time to complete the evolution before they're destroyed. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Finally, Vex Corvani spoke. You're saying that humanity and these other species are meant to be weapons against the Devourers, not weapons. Amy corrected gently. Healers of Devourers became what they are because they chose the path of consumption and destruction. They can be Change back, but only by beings who have learned to exist in harmony with reality, instead of trying to dominate a how-do. We know this will work. General facts for an Ask Steve smiled, because the Primarchs showed us what happened the last time someone tried another species in A. Different part of the galaxy. About years ago, the holographic images changed one final time, showing a beautiful blue-green world surrounded by ships of impossible design. The dark ships of the Devourers approached, but instead of attacking, they simply stopped. The Transcended One successfully converted an entire Devourer fleet. Jake explained they turned destroyers into gardeners, parasites into protectors. The converted Devourer spent the next 1,000 years restoring the worlds they had previously destroyed. What happened to Transcended Ones? Lisa asked. They moved beyond physical existence. Like the Primarchs, they're still out there somewhere watching and waiting. President Nelson stood up slowly. Jake, are you telling us that humanity is supposed to become like them, to give up our physical forms only if we choose to? Jake replied, the path has many stages. We're still at the beginning, but yes, eventually those who complete the journey will transcend physical limitations entirely. And if we refuse, if we choose to remain as we are, Jake's expression grew sad. Then we'll face the Devourers with traditional weapons and traditional thinking, and we'll lose just like thousands of other civilizations have lost. Admiral Carter asked the question everyone was thinking. How long do we have to decide the main Devourer fleet will arrive in? Years, Steve answered. But their scouts are already in our galaxy. They'll reach the outer systems within months, so we have months to convince the entire galaxy to undergo a fundamental change in consciousness. General Faxverin sounded skeptical. We have months to plant the seeds. Amy corrected. The change itself will happen naturally once beings understand what's possible. Fear of the Devourers will accelerate the process, just like it did for US. Jake stood up again and looked out at the stars. The choice is simple, but not easy. Evolve or perish, transcend or be consumed, work together or die separately. He turned back to face the room full of leaders. The Primarchs are willing to teach anyone who asks, but they won't force the knowledge on anyone. Free will is sacred to them. Where do we start? President Nelson asked. With volunteers, Jake replied. From every species that's willing to try, will take them to the deep dark where the Primarchs wait. Those who complete the training will return to teach others. As the meeting continued, Admiral Carter realized that they were planning the biggest change in galactic history, not through conquest or politics, but through evolution itself. Humanity, the newcomers to galactic civilization, where 8 months had passed since the revelation about the Devourers. The galaxy was changing faster than anyone had thought possible. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the observation deck of the new Lunar Command Center, watching ships from dozens of different species arriving and departing every day. The changes had started slowly at first. Only a few brave volunteers from each species had agreed to travel to the deep dark for training with the Primarchs. The Corvani had sent their best scientists. The Vorthans had sent their most elite warriors. Even smaller governments had chosen their finest minds to make the journey. But then the scouts arrived 3 months ago. Dark ships had appeared at the edge of the galaxy. They moved slowly, methodically, consuming small asteroids and dead planets to fuel their advance. The sight of actual Devourer vessels had ended all doubts about the threat. Humanity had described. Admiral Captain Jake Morrison said as he joined her at the observation window. The morning reports are ready. Lisa turned to look at Jake. He continued to change as the months passed. His silver hair now seemed to move by itself, flowing like liquid metal. His eyes held tiny stars, and when he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that made people feel calm and hopeful. How many new volunteers today? Lisa asked. Ships representatives from different species of training centers in the deep dark are running at full capacity. Lisa nodded. The transformation of the galaxy was accelerating. Every person who completed the consciousness expansion training returned home, able to teach others. The knowledge spread like wildfire, changing entire worlds. Within weeks, what about the resistance movements? Jake's expression grew sad. Still active. The Hegemony Coalition refuses to believe the Devourer threat is real. They think this is all a human plot to take over the galaxy. The Hegemony Coalition was a group of smaller governments that had always resented the power of the major empires. They saw humanity's new abilities as just another form of domination, no different from Corvani technology or Vorin military. Might are they still trying to attack our ships, yes, but they can't hurt us any more. Their weapons pass right through our vessels we exist in. Too many dimensions for traditional attacks to affect us. Dr. Amy Brooks floated into the observation lounger, body now semi-transparent and glowing with soft light. She had progressed further along the consciousness expansion path than most humans. Sometimes she existed in multiple locations at once, teaching different groups simultaneously. Lisa Jake, she said with a warm smile, I have wonderful news from the training centers. What kind of news? Lisa asked the first. Corvani student has achieved dimensional transcendence high. Scientist Vex Corvani himself completed the final stage this morning. Jake smiled. How is he handling it? Better than expected. He said that for the first time in his life, he truly understands what science is supposed to accomplish, not domination over nature, but harmony with it. Lisa watched as a group of mixed ships prepared to depart for the deep dark. Humans, Corvani Vorans, and several other species were traveling together. As equals months ago, such cooperation would have been impossible. Amy, how many of our people have reached full transcendence now? About from the original Meridian crew, another 1,000 from the volunteers who joined us in the deep dark. The number grows. Every day, Commander Steve Rodriguez materialized next to them. He no longer needed to walk through doors. His consciousness could appear anywhere he focuses attention. The afternoon briefing is ready, he announced. We have updates from all sectors. They moved to the command center where holographic displays showed the current state of the galaxy. Green dots represented worlds that had accepted the consciousness expansion training. Red dots showed Devourer Scout positions. Yellow dots marked worlds that were still undecided. Report, Lisa said. The Vorthan Confederacy has officially disbanded their military. Steve began general facts. Vorin completed his training last week. He says that beings who understand true reality don't need weapons. What about their defense against the scouts? They don't need traditional defenses anymore. The transcended Vorthans can simply convince the scout ships to sleep until the main fleet arrives. Amy pointed to another section of the display. The Corvani Empire has begun dismantling their research facilities. They're converting them into consciousness expansion centers. Vex Corvani believes they can train their entire population within years. That's faster than we hoped, Jake said with satisfaction. Lisa studied the red dots that showed Devourer positions. How close are the scouts now? The nearest ones will reach inhabited systems in months, Steve replied, but we're ready for them to find. Ready? Jake stepped forward and gestured at the display. The view changed to show the deep dark where thousands of ships from hundreds of species work together in perfect harmony. We now have fully operational training centers, Jake explained. Each one can handle 1,000 students at a time. More importantly, we have over fully transcended beings ready to confront the Devourers. Will that be enough? More than enough. The Primarchs estimate that a transcended minds working together can convert an entire Devourer fleet. We have a times that number. Amy's expression grew thoughtful. The real question isn't whether we can stop the Devourers, it's what happens afterward. What do you mean? Lisa asked. Once the Devourers are converted back to their original nature, they'll want help restore what they destroyed, but that process could take thousands of years. Do we stay to help them, or do we move on to the next challenge? Steve smiled. That's a good problem to have. New alarm sounded in the command center, but these weren't warning alarms. They were celebration signals. What's happening? Lisa asked. Jake's face lit up with joy. The first conversion has succeeded. The Devourer scout ship in the Anner system has stopped consuming planets. It's now helping to restore the worlds it damaged. The main display showed images from the Anner system. A massive dark ship that had been stripping a planet bare was now using its power to rebuild the world's ecosystem. Green plants were growing where there had been only ash. How? Lisa whispered. A team of transcended Corvani made contact with the ship's consciousness. Amy explained. They showed the Devourers what they used to be before fear and hunger consumed them. The ship remembered its original purpose and chose to change. More celebration signals began sounding across the galaxy. Other scout ships were making the same choice. The conversion process was working better than anyone had dared hope. This is incredible. Lisa said. You're actually saving them. We're all saving each other, Jake corrected. That's what consciousness expansion really means, understanding that we're all connected, all part of the Same universal story. Over the following weeks, the transformation of the galaxy accelerated beyond all predictions. Entire civilizations chose to abandon their old ways and embrace consciousness expansion wars that had lasted for centuries ended overnight as former enemies discovered they could share thoughts and feelings directly. The Devourer main fleet, when it finally arrived, found a galaxy that welcomed them instead of fighting them one by one. The massive dark ships chose to remember their original nature. They began using their incredible power to restore destroyed worlds and help new civilizations grow. Lisa found herself promoted to Galactic Coordinator, a position that didn't exist months earlier. Her job was to help coordinate the restoration efforts as former Devourer ships worked alongside transcended beings from hundreds of species. On the first anniversary of the Meridian's return, Lisa stood once again on the observation deck of Luna Station. But now she could see ships that existed in multiple dimensions, beings of pure light, working alongside physical creatures and planets that glowed with renewed life. Jake Morrison appeared. Beside her, though, he spent most of his time now in the deep dark teaching new students. Any regrets? He asked Lisa. Thought about the question seriously. Humanity had given up its innocence, its simple view of reality. Many humans now existed more in other dimensions, and in normal space, Earth itself was becoming a training center for consciousness expansion. But the galaxy was at peace for the first time in recorded history. Entire species that had been extinct were being restored by converted Devourer ships. New forms of life were emerging as transcendent minds learned to create rather than just discover. No regrets, Lisa said. Finally, this is better than anything we could have imagined. The Primarchs are proud of humanity, Jake said. They say we've exceeded even their expectations. We become teachers of teachers' guides for an entire galaxy. Amy Brooks materialized next to them now, existing as pure consciousness. Most of the time, the next phase is beginning. She announced, we've received contact from another galaxy. They're facing their own Devourer crisis. Lisa looked out at the transformed stars and smiled. Humanity had found its true purpose in the universe, not as conquerors or explorers, but as healers and teachers. They had become the species that helped others discover their own infinite potential. The age of conflict was ending. The age of consciousness was just beginning, and at the center of it all, the species that everyone had once considered newcomers to the galactic community had become the architects